Hello, Glocal Citizens. It's Florence Adu, your host for the podcast that inspires a borderless mindset around doing something in the world. It is the first day of autumn, and the seasons are changing, and we're getting more and more into the lives and careers of local citizens around the world, particularly here in the US, since I am here for an extended period, making sure that my vote counts without having to deal with any absenteeism and just making sure that I'm doing my citizenship duty of voting. So this week, I'm in New York, and my guest, who is based in Los Angeles, California, is joining me for a two-part conversation. My guest is an old friend. His name is Dr. Muri Raifu, who is an accomplished spine and neurosurgeon with particular expertise in minimally invasive endoscope-assisted spine surgery. That is a mouthful. He's based in LA, as I mentioned, where he spends his time not only managing his cases in his private practice, he is also an assistant professor of neurosurgery at UCLA. He's a member of the Africa Union and Africa CDC COVID-19 Clinical Case Management Group. And he's the CEO and founder of Healthtech startup Talamus Health. We're so happy to have Muri on the podcast today. Hi there, Glocal Citizens. Welcome back to the podcast that inspires a borderless mindset around doing something in the world. I'm Florence Adu, and I'm your host. And this week, we're coming to you entirely from the United States. That's me in New York, and my guest this week is in Los Angeles, California. And I guess I don't have to say anything more. I'm just really excited. This is an old friend. I think we're going to have a great conversation about the work he's doing in Africa, as well as the work he does here in the US. And so I'd like to welcome to the podcast, Dr. Muri Raifu.
Hello.
Hi, welcome.
Hi.
So Muri, tell us more about who you are and what inspires you.
Who am I? I mean, how long do we have?
We have as much time as you're willing to offer.
Okay, well, I like to think of myself as a regular man. He's a regular guy who is just trying to navigate his way through the world and do some good while I'm here. My profession is great, but it doesn't fully define who I am. I'm a neurosurgeon, as you all know. I have my own private practice here in Los Angeles, and also have a tech company that is both here in the States and also on the continent. As you all know, I was born and raised in Ghana. Moved here when I was 15, just about to turn 16, way back in the day. But I also have Nigerian heritage mixed in as well. So I have both. And my mom is still in Kumasi. I'm a Kumasi boy. I was born and raised there. Say Chrome, yeah. But, in my childhood, I spent some time in Lagos as well. And then in the United States, I've pretty much lived in several places: Massachusetts for college, New York for work, Minnesota for high school and all of that, and California for training. And now I'm back in California.
Okay, back in Cali. So you're my first physician, my first doctor on the program. So when I was growing up, that was what I was supposed to be, right? I was supposed to be a doctor. Like everyone's like, oh, okay. Yes, exactly. You're going to be a doctor.
Engineer or lawyer or...
Right. Well, I chose the engineer. I chose the engineer.
You had to choose one of those. Otherwise, it's a problem.
Yeah, basically. But I love math and science. So I was actually pretty committed to medicine until I did a few internships and I just hated the hospital. So tell us about how you came to be a physician.
So, I mean, I was one of those kids in college that actually thought about so many other career paths. While I was in college, yes, medicine, I hadn't moved to the United States pretty much on my own. So, I was no family here really. I had some host families that I had become close to. But my mom wanted me to just do well. And being a first generation college graduate, it was one of those things that there was no precedence to say, okay, this is what you must be. Obviously, being a doctor, being an engineer, being a lawyer, all of those are sort of things that you always looked up to just because you're African.
Right. Right.
But I always had the option to do other things. I never felt the pressure to really become a doctor per se, right? So in college, actually, I was a double major in biology and also in Black studies, which for those who are not aware, is a combination of African studies, African American studies and Caribbean studies all put together. And I was a major in that. And I actually did a thesis on syncretic religions, for example. A lot of people don't know that about me. So
No, not at all.
and I did another thesis. I was crazy. I did another thesis in biology that had to do with genetics and all of that. So I'm also kind of trying to see where the bleeding edge is between those kinds of things, and really consider for a long time doing African literature for grad school.
Okay.
So kind of going down that path until I decided to just do medicine. I was still a student on a student visa, and when you're under those constraints, there are certain paths you kind of almost get guided through a certain set of pathways, right? You go through the line of least resistance, if you will. So your choices as to what you did next really was not purely about what you just wanted to do, but also part of it is driven by what you can do. So not to say that I'm not glad choosing the path of physician. I'm very happy with what I do, and I feel very fortunate to do it. I'm just trying to explain that I wasn't one of those Africans where your head was being hit every day that this is the path you must take.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. And do you think some of that has to do with your mother? And you've mentioned this before, your mother is a market woman.
Yeah.
So she's an entrepreneur in herself. So do you think that her not being so adamant about you having to choose one path was instrumental in that?
Yeah.
Her back.
Again, she's always been, a woman who kind of has a very complicated insights about life, if you will. And I learned a lot from her just by observing her, right?
Yeah.
Her ability to be resilient in difficult times, her ability to kind of have tough times and then kind of rise back up to ensure that the family was always okay. That's always been sort of a strength that up until to this day, when I'm in a tough spot, I go back to that. To kind of see how did she manage these kinds of situations with as little resources as she had. Our ability to make do with very little and figure out solutions in some of the toughest times, for me, has been what has been my guiding principle in everything I deal with. And that means going through residency. Most people realize after med school for residency, you have to do 7 years of residency. And during the time I was doing residency, we were working over 100 hours a week, sometimes 120 hours. So imagine having 3 stressful jobs for 7 years.
Oh,
that's how residency was.
Yeah, I dated a resident before, and it was
exactly. So that's what the experience of being a resident was like. And so there were many tough times where I had to really draw back on how this market woman, again, with very little education, but probably one of the smartest people. By the way, my mom can calculate anything. In 2 seconds. One of the most brilliant minds I know. How does she handle these things? And for me also, it allows me to, my friends are like, well, you got to let people know you're a neurosurgeon. You got to do this, you got to do that. And I tell them, I don't see it that way, because I've never really defined someone's education. I've never equated someone's education to their level of intelligence. Because I grew up around a lot of people who were very, very, very smart. They just never got formal education. And so those are 2 separate things altogether. And so I say that, I want to judge people based on their native intelligence, like their actual intelligence, not because they have some fancy degree from some fancy school or whatever,
Sure. So let me ask also, why neurosurgery?
So it's funny because, again, in the vein of me being very Pan-African in my view, and all of that, my initial goal in med school was to do internal medicine or emergency medicine, get an MPH, get hooked up with the World Health Organization, do a few things in that path. So that was sort of, that was what I thought I was going to do. Then, when I was a medical student, and I'm going to date myself now. This is in 19, because I graduated 2002. So 2001. Yeah, correct. And I remember and I remember going through the different rotations, and I realized I wasn't a medicine kind of guy. I'm more a surgery kind of person.
Got it.
I'm more like that. My temperament was more surgical.
Sure.
And so that is another lesson in life, right? I think I probably would not be happy if I was internal medicine right now. Not because it's not a good field, it's just wouldn't fit me and the things that I wanted to do. So being able to pivot from what you had thought you're going to do, when you have new information, your willingness to allow yourself to take in that information, right? And change your mind without feeling guilty, and change your mind without feeling like you have to make somebody happy. It's extremely important to the long-term happiness for you. And so I was really looked at it, and I looked at, remember, I was again an immigrant, no family support. I needed to start making some money because I had family I wanted to help back home and all of that. And knowing that there's a long-term, an extra 4 years of hard knock life for residency, for me to do in residency by choosing neurosurgery versus internal medicine, at that time for me was, whoa, this is a big life decision.
Right.
But I couldn't get myself away from thinking this is the right thing for me. So I decided that, okay, then I'm going to do it anyway. And so I ended up doing neurosurgery. And exactly what attracted me to neurosurgery is, one is I like challenges. It's very challenging. You get to really, it's sort of at the edge of the buck stops here with me, right? I've done trauma most of my career, which means sometimes you need to get into somebody's head within the next half hour to an hour, or they're done, like they're dead. And being able to organize everything around that, from the time you get the phone call to organizing everybody and getting everybody on their A game and getting into that person's head within an hour, for me was sort of the ultimate edge of what it means to really be out there making a difference.
Right.
And so that's the kinds of things that attracted me to neurosurgery.
Okay. So before we get a little bit deeper into your entrepreneurial pursuits, I want to go into my why the where question. So this is where I ask you to tell us how you came to be living, working, and playing exactly where you live.
Okay. So as you all know, I did my residency here at UCLA at Los Angeles. But then when I was done, between college, so I did the college in Massachusetts, Amherst College. And I had done a year and a half or so stint in New York in the financial industries. Believe it or not, I was a biotechnology analyst for a financial firm.
Okay. No, wait. How did you get into that?
Okay. Well, I had been admitted to several medical schools at the time.
Okay.
But I couldn't pay for it because I was an international student. And I didn't qualify for any scholarships. I didn't qualify for those kinds of things.
Right.
So I needed to figure out how. Now I've done the hard part. I've done the pre-med. I've done all that, and got into med school in spite of the restrictions around international students, because a lot of people just wouldn't consider international students. So the pool of schools I could apply to at that time, I don't know if it's changed now, but at that time, the pool of schools to which I could apply to was limited. But I got into several. And the question is, many of them are like, well, we need you to put 4-year money into escrow. Now, back then, exactly, the whole 4 years into escrow.
What?
Wow. A local guarantor. Someone loans for you to do that. And that was like, at that time was already med school per year was about $45,000. So you're looking at getting somebody to guarantee you for $180,000, or you have to have the money in escrow. Okay, well, either way, you have to get the money in escrow. So they guarantee the loan for you. The loan goes into escrow so that they know you can actually pay for the 4 year of med school. Right. And I still get from time to time, I think many schools still hold that because every so often, someone will reach out to me and say, hey, I have a medical student who are 2 years into it and now they can't continue because, somebody who was doing the escrow for them pulled out or something like that. So it was always a big deal. So for me, I had gotten in and, in spite of all the odds, but then now I have to figure out how am I going to pay for this because my family certainly didn't have the money to do that.
Yeah.
So I took that year off, one, to say, okay, look, again, my nature of bringing in information and being willing to change paths, the set of information that comes to me says something else. And so that year was to figure it out. And my friends, most of my friends in college, again, who, by the way, all did well in financial industry, we're all going to the financial industries, my roommates, all of that. So I found a job in that space. It was great. It gave me time to really, and then I was in New York. I lived in Fort Greene at the time, right on Washington Park, and commuted to Manhattan. And kind of used that year to kind of sort out, how I'm going to pay for med school. And so I was fortunate to be able to figure it out, connect myself to some people. So I had two jobs. My number one job is to go to work and bring in some money to live and figure things out, save some money. The other part was to sort out the whole medical school payments. So that's what I was able to do. And then before I could then start med school.
Okay.
Now, so then after med school, residency at UCLA, then of course I had made friends. A lot of my friends from college on the East Coast had lived in New York still. Many of the friends I made in that year and a half were still in New York, and I made a lot of close friends. And so I was itching to get back to to the East Coast because most of the people I really knew were on the East Coast.
Yeah.
So I moved to the East Coast, joined the New York Presbyterian system and practiced. And I think that's where we met.
Yes.
In New York. So I was there for 5 years. And then, I always tell people I left the continent, but my heart never left. I just, while I was practicing, there was this itch that said, there's much more I can do, not just practice neurosurgery, which for a lot of people, I'm crazy for even saying that neurosurgery is a lot.
Yeah.
But I wanted something that I can do to actually affect a lot more people. For a neurosurgeon, yes, I make a difference in people's lives on a one-on-one basis. But I felt like there were other ways, given where I am, what I know, the relationships I have, to do something bigger than that. And so 5 years into my practice, I decided to take a sabbatical and go and get my master's at the Kennedy School.
Okay.
So I went to get my master's in public administration. And that time I really started thinking about what am I going to do when I'm done with this master's, and ended up, starting this company, which is the Talamus Health, and decided that coming to California was one way to deal with it. Also, my girlfriend at the time, and now my wife, also lived in California.
Okay.
So starting the practice in the place where people, of course, she was a big reason, one of the big reasons also. But coming here allowed me to do two things. It allowed me to start a practice because I still practice, but also start my company at the same time. And coming back to California, there was just so many people I knew from the residency that are now practicing in the community. So I was able to plug myself back into that
Your
community quickly, get my practice going while I slowly, I get to the business of actually starting the tech company at the same time. And California also is very tech centric. Place. So all of that put together was part of the reason I decided to move to California.
Okay. Nice. So now let's talk about Talamus. So this is a tech company with a very specific focus. So tell us about that business.
Yeah. So, our tech company is essentially focused on kind of decentralize the healthcare experience and kind of digitizing that experience, especially when it comes to patient experience, because, a lot of the tech innovations that you see are really B2B type of innovations. And that is driven by making the hospitals run efficient, which is important. But none of them are built in a way that allows patients to also have good experience. So patients end up having to kind of fit themselves into whatever modality is created. And we wanted to kind of do both in some regards, give hospitals the ability to be more efficient in their processes, but also to give patients the ability to actually have a say in the process as well.
Mhm.
And I wanted to do this on the continent. As I mentioned before, this is really for me about really changing the continent. And the continent in a lot of ways doesn't have the kind of when it comes to digitization, doesn't have the kind of institutional habits that we have here because, your US has been through digitization for a while now. Whereas on the continent, the majority of places are still not digitized. So we saw an opportunity to create a digitization experience that doesn't only solve the B2B aspect of things, as in making hospitals efficient, but also inserts the patient experience as part of it so that the patients actually have a much better experience on the system. So that's what we have. We started off initially as South Africa. We're in Ghana, Nigeria, and Zimbabwe at the moment. Okay. And believe it or not, now with COVID, we've seen a lot of opportunities here in the United States. So we've started exploring that as well.
Nice. So take us through the patient experience, because so I've experienced both public and private health in Ghana. And so public health is very interesting because it's all based on your folder. So you go to whatever institution, you get a folder, and it's this paper folder. So if anything happens to that folder, you're completely lost.
You're lost, yeah.
And there's nothing that's there. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so our system is a digital folder. So it gives you a digital folder, and it kind of aggregates all your folders regardless of where you go. As long as you are the one who interacted with them and gave permission, not only does it allow you to pull the information from that folder to aggregate it in one place, and you can have it on your phone, but more importantly, by permissioning another place, they can automatically have access to your folder if they are on our system. And if they're not, you actually can pull up your phone and hand it over to them, and they can have access to that folder. So that's just one aspect of it. You can make appointments on our system. You can manage your appointments. You can make appointments. You can change appointments. If things come up, you get reminders for your appointments. You can even pay for your medical care on your phone. If you need to, you can manage your medications on your phone. You can do all sorts of things on there.
Sure. So are you considering, so you've branded it, but do you also have like a white label product that you kind of can brand and sell?
If it's a big institution, if the institution is big, we do. And we have done quite a couple of those already.
Awesome.
So we've done with a large company down in Zimbabwe. We did a white label for them. And then we did one for a company in Ghana as well. So we are open to that, but it can be just for efficiency's sake and just from practicality's sake. We can't do it for individual hospitals.
Okay, so it has to be a whole system.
Yeah, it has to be if you have it's a lot of work to do that and maintain it.
Sure. Because as soon as you say that, I'm thinking, wow, that's like the dream healthcare, I guess, kind of insurance company type of thing. Like that would be what I would envision, is those are the users, particularly in Africa, where you can aggregate, or even the government, right? So you basically equalize access through all of because if you go to one clinic or one hospital in Ghana, you can't go to another. You have to stick with that one because your records don't follow you. So this sounds like a perfect solution for public health in the public sector, most definitely.
Yeah, in the public sector for sure. And we are looking to work with the public sector and all of that. So we are still in conversations,
Right, because the company's it's 4 years old now, right?
4 years old, but people forget that when you start a company, it takes
exactly.
You have to build the tech, and people assume that because apps are so easy to find and download, people assume that building an application is a very easy thing, and it's not. It's a lot of work, right? Especially when you build then a multi. So our interface, we have about 12 different interfaces,
right,
on our platform. So there's so many roles within our platform that we deal with. And we have inventory system. We even have a claims adjudication system, speaking of insurance companies. And people forget that each of these things is a juggernaut. That's there are a lot of work, that goes into building those things. So for the first few years of that starting, we were just basically building it. and figuring out like, yeah, we did a lot of the talk and meeting people and kind of building the relationships from a customer side of things. But the tech itself, it always takes a while to really build it properly.
Yes.
There are a lot of bad technology out there, but if you
A
want really
lot.
good technology, you have to take your time. And sometimes building good technology just simply takes time.
Thanks for joining us for part 1 of my conversation with Dr. Muri Raifu. Please join us next week for part 2 when we hear more about Talamus Health and the man behind the science. As always, you can catch us at www.glocalcitizenspod.com. You can catch us on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, so many podcast platforms. Anywhere you look, you can probably find us. So as usual, please do comment. Please do subscribe. Please do share with your friends and check out the show notes. They're going to be really, really great for this week's episode. So until next time, bye for now.